I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Charlene. Welcome to Empowered, Life Lessons of Everyday Women.
Each episode, you're going to meet an amazing woman who has struggled through challenges both in her home life and work life and has become very successful. Meet Kim F. Remember to have fun. Find what excites you to learn and grow. Kim has faced several obstacles head-on. Hear how she overcame those obstacles and found the strength to find the blessings in her life. Her positive attitude is truly inspirational. So, grab a cup of coffee, get in a comfy chair, and let's talk to Kim. Welcome, Kim. We're so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So thanks for chatting with me.
Absolutely. You've had a wide variety of life experiences, more so than probably most people. But if you were able to go and talk to your 20-year-old self and give that person a little piece of advice, what would that be?
It would definitely be to remember that fun matters. I think, being a young person, it's a struggle. I've got an 18-year-old now, and she's so stressed out about starting college, and I've got to select the one program that I'm going to be stuck in for the rest of my life, this one career, but I tell her to follow the fun right now, like follow what excites you, because that excitement's going to continue to drive you to want to learn and grow. Fun really matters. And then I'm learning that again now, this new stage of my life too. So
yeah, it is important. Yeah. Well, you spend so much of your time working that you need to have fun along the way.
And I think people also forget that you can have fun even when you're working. I think that's one of the things that I think follow the fun is a great catchphrase. I think I'm going to do something with that. I really love it. So thank you.
I understand that you were a single parent pretty early on in your career. Can you talk a little bit about the struggles of raising a child on your own and some of the ways that were able to manage that?
Yes, a very interesting time in my life. I was 25 when I had my daughter, and I was a stay-at-home mom initially for the first couple of years of her life. And then, relationship with dad went south, but I was not financially prepared for that. I was totally financially dependent on him. I hadn't finished my degree yet. I had kind of stopped everything to be a mom. And so when our relationship dissolves, I found myself without his help either, because he was a bit controlling. It was a bit of an abusive relationship.
Oh,
I'm sure that I didn't have somewhere to go. I was miles and miles away from family. I didn't know anyone in town because I had really been very isolated at home with him, and he was a bit controlling of who I spoke with. And I was just like, whatever, I just want to be at home with my baby. So let a lot of things happen. But once we decided to end the relationship, I was scrambling to figure out work. I didn't have a car. I didn't have friends. I was like, what do I do? So I was able to secure a job working at a college as an admissions counselor. And, I was just kind of talking with others about what was going on. I was carpooling and taking the bus for like 2 hours a day. I mean, it was awful.
Wow.
I did not have a lot of support from him, but I did definitely use education to help propel me. Also, financial aid that helps subsidize my income, because I wasn't making very much, to help me get on my feet. I definitely was in that student loan trap, not just for education, but also to keep me and my daughter
survivor
mode. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? And I understand this is really personal, but you came from an abusive relationship. You said that he was pretty controlling. Were there signs that you might be able to share with other people where they may not realize they're in a situation or getting into a situation like that, that maybe the light bulb might go on for them?
Great question. I think very early on, the term now I've heard is called love bombing. He laid on the gifts and the praise and everything really thick from the beginning before really getting to know me. I think if somebody is wanting to be exclusive really quickly, they're not being more curious about you and instead are just wanting you all to themselves right in the beginning. It might feel really good to feel wanted and get lots of praise and all this attention, but it's not a healthy start to things. I think definitely whoever you start dating, they have to want to be your friend and they have to want to really know you, and it has to be genuine. If you don't really know someone up front and you're all of a sudden in love, yeah, it's questionable. But now I was in my 20s and I had never had that much attention before, and it was exhilarating.
That's
But
intoxicating to have somebody
it is.
want to be with you that much. But I think what you've identified is they need to know who you are.
Yeah,
And you don't want to lose who you are. I think that's
exactly.
really important. I used to, when I was in college, I saw a lot of relationships that I thought were like unhealthy relationships.
Mhm.
And I ended up, for whatever reason, I guess I had a good ear, but I would like consult with them or talk to them. And I knew their relationship was way over and that it was toxic for them, right? But they didn't know it. And they had to come to terms with that by either talking it through or just realizing they had lost a chunk of themselves.
But I think people have to realize that on their own. It's
Question-
questions, making them question
Yes.
that relationship.
Asking them questions so that they can identify themselves
Yep.
that things are maybe not right, even in a relationship, maybe that's not so, not as abusive, but just where they've lost who they are
Mm-hmm.
and helping them identify through questions.
Yep. Exactly.
So, speaking of toxic people, have you had to deal with toxic people in your workplace? And how did you approach the issue and what might you do differently?
Such a great question. Yes, toxic people in the workplace. I'm not a competitive person, at least not with other people. I tend to be competitive with myself. Wow, when there's folks in the workplace that are highly competitive with everyone, it becomes very hard to be their teammate. And I've had a few instances. I would say my most recent manager or my director, we'll call her Lady. And Lady, she was just, she was always the smartest person in the room. If anyone else was getting attention or had ideas, she would find some way to curtail them, and then 3 weeks later come up with it like, oh, I have this great idea.
Wow.
And it just it was so exhausting because I wanted to I love working. I wanted to do well. I wanted to come up with ideas. I was in a startup environment and the sky was the limit. It was exciting. But wow, she took the wind out of everyone's sails with just perpetually competing with everyone. She had to be praised constantly. And then we saw this culture develop where everyone knew to come into the room and made sure to give her praise. Wow, this is so great. You have such great ideas.
Oh
And
my.
oh, thank you. And just overly praising her, overly thanking her, and not giving that praise to everyone else. And it was spreading. And oh, it was so unhealthy.
Having been in a situation at work where you feed off each other's toxicity, if that makes sense, but you kind of get caught up in it.
It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And
But the opposite can be so true, right? You can either feed off of the positive energy or you feed off of the negative energy. And what you just described is feeding off the negative energy to try to make it more bearable. But if people could turn it around and be positive with others, everyone, not just one person to placate them, your entire environment would be better.
Absolutely. I'd say that there has to be an acknowledgement from higher ups, because if it looks like leadership in the organization,
Yep.
if they're placating also to these toxic personalities, then everyone starts following. I have to say, leadership, if someone's in a leadership position, it's so crucial that they set the tone for the rest of the organization.
Absolutely.
So, talking about setting the tone, let's go to a more positive subject matter. Have you had the opportunity to mentor others?
Yes, I have. Also in my last position, I wore a lot of hats. I led a small group that was handling disputes, complaints, potential lawsuit threats and things like that within our organization. And neither of them had ever been in a role like that before. So there was a lot of imposter syndrome, nervousness. They were hesitant to take on some projects. And so we did do a lot of one-on-one activity. And it was really, honestly, the mentoring felt like it was more listening than it was kind of dictating to them. Because I do feel like people kind of intrinsically know what needs to be done and what they believe in and what they want to do. And typically people want to do well in their roles, right? So I think a lot of it was just asking them questions like, how do you want this to go? And it was just drawing that creativity and excitement out of them. And for me, mentorship looked more like just giving people freedom to create.
That's interesting. So, I mean, you've gone through a lot. Do you see a way that you may be able to identify people who might be struggling or may not have the best things going on in their life and able to identify that and help them through it, some of it?
That's a great question. In the workplace, it can get very tricky, right? Because as managers or leaders, we're not really allowed to pry so much into people's personal lives. There's questions we can and can't
Right.
ask, without kind of breaching some lines that get drawn by HR. But I definitely always like to let folks know that the door's always open and they can talk to me. And I try to be communicative about my life so they also feel like they have permission to share with me. But I do try to look for cues like, if it seems like they're more quiet and reserved in meetings, like they don't want to contribute, I try to encourage that, make sure they know their voice matters, that we want to hear from them. And then, also if there's other actions that are happening where it looks like they're slipping, I've had that happen as well. Their work starts declining or they're showing up late and it seems like they're falling off the wagon. I think a lot of things can be cured just with a conversation and not being judgmental or punitive and things like that. You try to make things more difficult for them.
Right. It sounds like you're trying to make a safe environment so they feel like they can talk if they want to.
Right.
You can do something as simple as go to the grocery store, and I do this. And somebody's just grumpy. The checkout person is just grumpy. And I'm thinking to myself, they're having a bad day because of something that's going on. It's
Right.
not personal. So I try to light it up, just engage a little bit, light it up, because I know it's not personal, but you can give somebody a gift of just kindness.
Absolutely.
And it goes a long way. It may just change their mood for the day, or it may just, but you never know what's going on with somebody. So you have to
lighten it up.
And that's huge. I really think not taking things personally is 90% of good communication, right? Because there's so many times people can say the most innocuous things, but it'll trigger something that happened long ago and you don't know what their story is and they're irate and then they just let it fester and they don't talk to you about it. And you're like, what's going on? But yeah, levity, humor about things and continuing to talk even when those people might be a little prickly, continuing to engage with them even after that. It's so huge.
So you just brought up something that triggered something for me. So I think there's a lot of times, and this happens to me, where someone will say something and it triggers something from when I was 15 years old, right? And it takes me back there and I am like, okay, I got to deal with this. And you don't even realize that you've regressed. Right. And I think that happens more often than not when people get upset or prickly, as you said. Right? They are just in a different place. You have to identify people that are not a positive influence with you, right? And there are several individuals that I know where they're toxic for me. They're not toxic for everybody else, but there's something about them that doesn't make me feel positive. And therefore, I don't need to engage anymore.
Yeah. That's a huge point. And that has become a really crucial point in my life right now. Because I know I shared with you both about my recent diagnosis.
Right.
And, I was diagnosed with leiomyosarcoma. It's a very rare but aggressive type of cancer. It was uterine cancer. And, or maybe you could tell by the haircut.
You look great.
You do.
Look great.
Thank you so much. I strongly feel that the amount of stress that it took on at work, and in my most recent role as a finance program manager for $12 million a month startup tech company, we had so many projects going. There's so much growth happening. It's just really very exciting an organization, but there was so much on my plate, and I found myself working really late at night, and it was mostly to avoid the backlash of the toxic people who would just be constantly demanding, competing, not being supportive, not, I mean, there's multiple times I'm like, I need more support. Is it in the budget? I will cut my salary. Let's get somebody else in here to help. I just had a team of two that was doing a ton of work for me already. I couldn't ask them to do any more. And so I was up all hours, knee deep in spreadsheets, and I was just so afraid of failing because the people above me were just not very, they just did not give a lot of grace for the time, a reasonable amount of time needed to get things done. So, and then often would push back. And I kind of take a bit of responsibility for maybe not pushing back more. I think I could have. I think I also just wanted to do well and win and be in good favor with these people that I thought otherwise acted very toxic. But I think it's what made me sick. I think I genuinely got this disease because I was constantly in a state of
Stress.
Elevated
Yeah.
cortisol, elevated stress. You see it in many, many different situations, but it's not necessarily a good thing. And I think the takeaway for our listeners is, you've got to find that work-life balance, because it is really important, whether it's that your parents are ill and you're trying to manage that and work, or you have small children. And I'm trying to relate to what our listeners would, in their situation, or you have somebody in your family that is ill. How do you balance everything so that you yourself don't get so stressed and so elevated?
Well, and I think so. I know you're talking about your current work environment, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but not only were you a single parent with a young child, but your mother was also ill for part of that time, correct? And so
Correct.
you are on your own juggling all those things. How did you ever find any work-life balance to try to alleviate some of that stress?
I mean, my piece really came through, I think for like a lot of women, food. It wasn't a great outlet, right? I tend to turn to my sweets, and I definitely gained some lbs because of that. It wasn't the best way to balance, but it would give me a little pick me up. I'm like, okay, I can get back to it. But also, I would say it was definitely spirituality, my faith. I think I did spend a lot of time in prayer, sometimes just a walk in the sun, side, and praying a bit for about 15 minutes was enough to just center myself and keep going. But yes, you're absolutely right. My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was her caretaker for about 6 years before, it was out of my hands. I couldn't do that. I just didn't have that skill set or the ability to not work and just take care of her. So she did end up going to a assisted living, which I always felt so guilty about, but I wish I did it sooner. She's so happy there. She has friends. She's playing bingo with people. She's having conversations. Now I call her. I'm like, hey, Mom, I want to come for a visit. And she's like, well,
I'm busy
out with Mona today. Can you do it tomorrow? Which is fabulous. I'm like, wow, I had so much guilt about moving her when I had no idea she would be this happy. So, I mean, for those that are taking care of elderly parents, breaking you down, and because there was some times where it did become impossible and even dangerous for her to be here.
Well, and it's not just people that are taking care of parents, it's elderly people that are taking care of their loved one. My father did the same thing, right? We had my mother at home. She had Alzheimer's, and she was at home for many, many, many years. But it was a drain on him. It became unhealthy for him. Even though we had a caregiver come in, live in, it was still a drain, and it is healthy for them. I know I've talked to other people who have put themselves into assisted living, and they did it purposely because they were healthy. They knew they were healthy enough, shouldn't be living on their own, but then they got to meet people, have people their own age, and it was a better environment for them as well. So
I think that's the unique person, because I think most people truly want to, having watched my mom age and go into assisted living and the fight and struggle to get there when she should have been there a couple of years earlier. But we all want to stay independent. We live in an
Absolutely.
independent world, and there's something beautiful. But the peace it must bring you, though, to know that she is in a place where she's happy, it brings you peace. And that reduces the stress on you. So it's, even though we have that guilt factor that runs around with us, you did the right thing, and she's happier for it, and you're happier for it.
It still can be stressful because her only source of income is Social Security. I'm subsidizing the remainder of what's due to the assisted living facility. So that's another piece that comes with those taking care of parents. My dad retired when he was 65 and ended up blowing through his retirement because inflation. You didn't know in 1985 that retirement wasn't going to be what he thought it was when he retired, like late 90s. So there wasn't much left for mom, and so she's there's another stressor on top of that. I don't know how people do it. I don't know how folks have parents that need care, and then we just don't have a system set up to
support
make it so that we can afford taking care of our parents, but also save for our own retirement. Something that's still a stressor.
So you mentioned that you're currently in the biggest struggle for your life, literally for your life.
Yeah.
And it came at a time when everything seemed to be falling into place for you. You'd just gotten your MBA, you recently remarried. How are you finding the strength, I guess, to find a perspective, and what can you share with other people?
Yes, thanks for asking this. It's great to be able to talk about this. Number one, I've got to say, this is going to sound weird, ladies, but this actually has been some kind of blessing in disguise for me. And maybe everyone doesn't have that experience, but my take on it has been, like you said, I've been a single parent for so many years. My child just became 18. That's 18, about 15 years. I'm doing this by myself, and I have grown so tired. And then between, taking care of ailing parents, and then financially, being required to hold everything together, and staying in work that, a toxic environment that I couldn't quite get out of because the job market wasn't paying what it should for the type of work I was doing. I felt very trapped. Now, because of my diagnosis, and it is, even though it is considered terminal, my prognosis is about 3 years, but I know I've met many people who've been able to have many more years than that. Cancer is not it's not the death sentence that it used to be. There's a lot of technology and it's constantly evolving. But even though I know things are probably more likely about 10% chance of getting beyond 5 years, even though I know my life might be cut short, it put everything in perspective for me. It made me realize just what is important to me, what really matters, what do I really want to do with my time on this planet, and the work that I want to do. Is it to work in this tech company to help this startup travel agency? No, I really would like to do work that I think is helping people the most, with the time that I have. Having conversations like this where we really get to get authentic, working with others on spiritual health. I do believe that, we have a big focus today in our culture on mental health, and there's just kind of this ignoring about God or, the universe, whatever you want to call it. We know what it is. It exists in all of us, and it matters. Our purpose, the meaning in our lives, and our ability to tap into, this energy that's bigger than ourselves. And so working with people on that, it's just, it's been great. I have been blessed with the opportunity. Like you mentioned, I just recently married, and then a year later, my diagnosis, but luckily my husband has top tier shelf medical insurance, which is great.
Awesome.
Right. And also he's been able to afford me the ability to stop working. So I have made that choice to take a step back and be at home and hang out with my cats and the stuff that I love to do. It doesn't have to make money. For the first time in I don't know how long,
Well, it helps to take some of the stress off you, so maybe you can get everything more in line, because that'll help you as much as the chemo and everything else. So
absolutely. Oh, it's huge. It's really huge. And getting myself out of an environment where, I'm constantly performing and constantly having to put on a mask and, oh, that didn't offend me. I'm just gonna keep working with these toxic people. It's been massive. I do feel like this has all been it's kind of the serendipity. Like, yeah, there's this diagnosis. And initially when I got it, I was like, holy cow, what am I going to do? I've got my mom's bills. I've got my child. How am I going to explain this to her? How am I going to afford? We have a mortgage. I don't want to burden my new husband with this. But you take it one step at a time, like you do everything in life. And, there's ways to make it happen. It's difficult, financially, we're not rich, but I've realized I don't have to be. I don't have to make six figures to be happy. I really don't. Just taking a breath, sipping my morning coffee and enjoying the
what
sunshine.
you've got.
I think when something happens, and we've all had some trauma in our lives, I've had certainly a medical trauma in my life that ended up with a good ending, but could have been a bad ending. I know that I learned from other people. I go out and I look at the sky differently than I used to. I take that time for that breath or that walk in the sunshine and just breathe it in. And I think it, like you said, in a way, there's a gift to kind of understanding that you're not always going to maybe have your health or whatever,
Right.
but just to take the time to reflect. And some people aren't lucky enough to have that, but I feel lucky that I did.
Well, it forces you to take a step back to reevaluate. And I think that's the best way to describe it, because you don't, otherwise you're just that little,
Just going.
yeah, you just go, you're the gerbil on the wheel, and
Right.
you're running and you're running and you're running and you're running, and it just forces you to take a step back. So you had mentioned, right, you struggled with a couple things. Do you mind me asking how you went about telling your child about this?
Yeah, that was definitely tricky. I definitely had to sit with it for a while and think about and play out how I would do that before I actually told her. And took me about a week before I was actually able to get it out. But her dad's grown up a bit as well, and so I wanted to tell her with him and with his new wife, and my husband was there. I guess I wanted her to see that she had a team of people around her and that we were all in this together. I didn't want her to feel like it was just her and me and she's about to lose me, because that C word, it scares everyone.
Yeah.
We all sat her down and I told her, like, well, I've been sick lately, because there were signs. I wasn't doing so well. I was in a lot of pain, while all the studies and tests were going on for a few weeks. And when I finally told her, like, they did find cancer, and I told her just like that. She immediately started crying, and so did I, but then I went into reassuring her that she's got a lot of love around her and everyone's supporting me, including dad, including your stepmom and your stepdad. And we're doing everything we can to beat this and work on things. When she started asking questions, because she's very smart, she asked, did they say that you're going to die? Did they say how long you have to live? I didn't want to lie to her.
Mm-hmm.
I was honest about it. I did tell her, she was 17 when I was telling her. And I said that, well, right now, the way the studies show, the prognosis says that I have about 3 years. It's much lower for 5. But there's people out there who get much longer. We go through treatment, and there's people who actually get to beat it. So we're going to stay positive. We're going to stay prayerful. And, she was also raised with a lot of faith, and we pray together, and she's been very positive. She's handled it very well. Initially, I think there was a bit of depression and she was just very clingy.
Mm-hmm.
But now We talk a lot more. She kind of did an interview like this with me for a
Oh, I
paper for
love
school.
that.
Yeah, I was asking a lot of questions about my goals and how I see the future now. And it was a very interesting conversation. But I told her that I still dream. I still think about things I want to do. And I think I'd like to teach one day. And, just tell her about all these bucket list items I have, right? And I think she also understands that I see this as a blessing. And she told me it was so cool that I felt that way about it because she thought this was so scary. But she sees how happy I am now compared to how I was when, you know, before I got my diagnosis. And
Wow.
so I hope it's a lesson to her that life is beautiful no matter what's going on. I mean, even the hard stuff is a
Right,
blessing.
right. Well, and I think you kind of triggered on something, right? You're taking that positive aspect of everything that's happened, and you're still hopeful in terms of appreciation of everything that you've got. And I think that goes a long way from a mental health perspective, just a positive attitude. I think that's great. How has your relationship improved maybe with your daughter? It sounds like you had a great relationship anyway, but I'm can only imagine that you're appreciating every minute that you guys have together.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's made our conversations a lot more, I would say, deeper. It's deepened those conversations. I think before, oh, we got to get to bed, and did you
Yeah.
shower, or did you wash your clothes? We get so caught up in the day to day. So now we take more time to savor our conversations with one another.
I was going to say,
Yeah, it really is.
even having a cup of coffee together,
Right.
treasuring those moments as opposed to, sometimes you'll sit down for a meal and before you know it, dinner's over and you're like,
Well, you're already thinking about what you have to do, all the other things that you have to do, and you're not appreciating the current moment.
Yeah, you even making a meal. You make a meal, it takes us like 45 minutes to make it, and then you eat it in 10, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the big points of this podcast is that we like to share with our listeners life lessons. So what has been your biggest life lesson or lessons? And any additional words of wisdom that you would like to leave with our listeners?
Biggest life lesson is, life life is really a gift, and it's bigger than work. It's bigger than the commute. It's bigger than your income. It's bigger than your house. It's bigger than all that. Really savoring your life and taking care of what's truly important to you. And we know we all have to do the logistics, right? We got to make sure the bills are paid. That's incredibly important. But things aren't as dire and as serious as we make them out to be, I think, a lot of times. Now that I've been able to take a step back, I mean, I had this MBA and I had this great corporate job and leadership, and it was so important to me. It was my identity. But I'm so thankful that I've kind of been stripped of that so I can see there's so much more to me and there's so much more to this life. And my relationships with my family and my friends, and what matters most to me is not something necessarily I'm going to get paid for, like talking about spiritual health, mental health, and how to really explore our lives without thinking about how to monetize it. Just savor your life every single day.
There's so much more to a person than their career, and that's
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been fantastic. We are so happy that you've joined us, and we're so happy to share this podcast with our listeners. And so we wish you well, and thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right.
To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Empowered Life Lessons of Everyday Women. We would really appreciate if you could leave us a rating or a review. If you have any challenges or questions you are facing, we want to hear from you as we value your input and suggestions. And if you have a compelling story or life lesson you would like to share, please connect with us at empoweredlifelessons@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms, or visit us at empoweredlifelessons.com.
In our next episode, meet Jasmine B. Jasmine knew she wanted to make a difference in the healthcare industry, but not just as a healthcare worker. After experiencing the difficulties of helping her grandmother and realizing the disconnect once patients leave the hospital, she founded Navi Nurses. Learn how Jasmine is making a difference in both the lives of patients and caregivers.